Right. For the past several months, the message in Washington from both parties has been jobs, jobs, jobs. President Obama sent his jobs bill to Congress, but it did not make it through either house as a complete package. And so now both the House and the Senate are breaking it down into pieces. Despite this effort, many are still skeptical that any meaningful jobs legislation will actually get passed before the 2012 elections. Joining me to talk more about this ongoing fight on Capitol Hill is Republican Congressman Chris Gibson. Congressman, thank you very much.
It's good to be with you. Thanks for
It is great to see you, so thank you very much. You're headed back on Monday. And will the House be taking up any legislation that looks in any way, shape, or form like any piece of the President's jobs plan?
Well, I think it's important to note that we just passed a key portion of the President's jobs plan, and that was these fair trade agreements.
Right,
you know,
good point.
We're talking about something that's going to add $10 billion to our gross domestic product. It's going to create 250,000 jobs. It's good for business. It's good for workers. It's good for America. And it's something that Democrats and Republicans in the Congress work together with the President to get done.
Well, perhaps not so great for our relationship with China, though.
Well, tell me more.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying. I mean, that's what there was a lot of rhetoric about this and about when the trade agreements were passed, that holding China accountable for its currency and for to make things fairer for the U.S.
I think that's
and China
still,
didn't react so terribly well.
Well, look, I think that's still in front of us, how we deal with that, and I actually view these in the same category. It has to do with fair trade. You look at South Korea, before this trade agreement, our exporters were dealing with 4 times higher tariffs than South Korea was dealing with when they were coming our way. Colombia had 98% of their goods coming here duty-free. We had less than 40% coming duty-free, so we changed that arrangement with these fair trade agreements working together. And with China, you know, the issue on the currency, 2005 study comes out, China's currency is 40% undervalued. Since that time, they've appreciated it about 30%, but they haven't appreciated it that full 40%.
But don't we play with fire when we deal with our relationship with them? I'm not suggesting that we placate them and let them do what they will with their currency, but they own so much of our debt.
We demand that they trade fairly. And that's why, you know, the spirit of what we're trying to get done here, I think, is important that we communicate this to China. Now, the administration has expressed some reservations about this legislation. I'd like to hear some more details. The one that particularly gets me of my interest is the thought that among some of the President's advisors that we could be violating trade agreements, the WTO, if we move forward with the legislation. So I don't see that in my read of it, but I'm willing to learn, and so I'd like to hear more from them. Okay,
but the only portion that is palatable in that whole $447 billion package, do you believe, was trade?
No, not at all. I think trade is a very important dimension of it. I think we can also come together on several other things. Infrastructure. Any disciplined organization recapitalizes over time, and our country is no different. We have to do this.
Right.
Roads and bridges. I actually broadly define infrastructure. I also include rural broadband in there, but we can absolutely come together. You know, we're short about $150 billion right now to fully fund a highway bill. Highway bill basically covering all the infrastructure for our country for a 6-year period when we're doing it right. We're short because the gas tax, when we went into recession, we drove less, and now we have a shortage. But there are some bipartisan ideas on how to make that up. A couple of them that have my interest.
Okay, but right, we're short actually money on any number of things, not just infrastructure, for example, but all over the table. And what we have from the President is a proposal that there would be a higher tax on the wealthy. Now, Senator Schumer says, okay, but wealthy as defined by the White House was $250,000 for an individual. That's too low. $1 million is a true, quote, millionaire's tax, if you will. The Republicans say no anyway. Period. No way you slice it. We're not increasing taxes on the rich. Do you feel that way?
Well, what we want to do is do tax reform. Important tax reform, which means looking at our complex and dense tax code, finding areas where we have tax expenditures, otherwise known as loopholes, that are not helping create jobs. We ought to close them.
Okay.
So I think that's got to be on the table. Now, we voted for that in our budget, so I'd like to see that be part of these discussions and broader discussions going forward. I think that tax reform and pro-growth tax reform that creates jobs, that adds to the coffers, is actually going to close the deficit.
Okay, but taxes, just to be clear, taxes on the rich is a non-starter for you. 250,000, 300 and whatever,
Well,
1 million.
I will tell
any
you
of it.
that a lot of that discussion is highly politicized, because what you're really talking about is, at the end of the day, if you want to make a difference on this, you're talking about effective tax rate. You could theoretically raise tax rates and get no more money. If there's loopholes, if there's more havens for people to find for their money, you're not going to get any more money.
Okay.
That's why the real issue is tax reform, that looks at the loopholes and looks at a way that we can grow the economy, close the ineffective loopholes, and then help small business with that.
So are you saying that the president, and particularly what he's doing right now, which of course is on a bus tour, going around to swing states, to key states like Virginia, for example, North Carolina, and pushing this jobs bill, pushing the tax the rich proposal, saying the Republicans don't want to play ball, that's all political with an eye towards 2012?
Well, look, I mean, presidents of both parties do this, right?
Sure.
They're trying to get public support for their plan. It's part of what goes on in American life. And, you know, I think it's important is a time like this that we find common agreement. We did this with the trade agreement. We've shown we can do it in a significant way. I think we ought to do it with infrastructure. I think that there are a couple ways that we can find this money. We could increase our domestic sources of oil. And we could have the oil companies pay for it with royalties.
By drilling in Alaska, for example?
By
Is that what you
drilling
mean?
offshore. And by using the royalties from these leases to go into the Highway Trust Fund. There's actually a bill right now that has bipartisan support. We've raised that with the Speaker. He has mentioned it in speeches. I'd like to see it gain some traction. I think that that's one way that we can get a fully funded highway bill, because remember, if we do, not only will we do the right thing for infrastructure, we're going to get Americans back to work in the process.
Yeah, we're actually talking about this a little bit later in the show. There's a new report out today that shows, again, that New York's bridges are quite deficient when it comes to, you know, structurally deficient, not dangerous per se, but deficient.
I support this because it's good for our district, it's good for our state, it's good for our country, but it's also the disciplined way forward. In the military, you know, we had, in my brigade, I had sets, kits, and outfits, I had vehicles. We had a recapitalization plan. A half-life of a given piece of equipment. And the plan was over time to either retrofit that piece of equipment or replace it with a new piece of equipment. That's what a disciplined organization does, and we have to do the same thing with our infrastructure.
Do you think some of this focus, all about this idea of taxing the rich and the millionaires tax, is because of what's happening down at Zuccotti Park?
No, I think when you talk about fundamental tax reform, this is something that both parties have been saying for some time. But that's really where we need to focus. Again, you could raise tax rates and not get a single additional dollar. What you really have to do is look at this dense and complex tax code, and particularly for loopholes, where the rich and where corporations will find tax breaks, and do an examination of what tax expenditures are helping create jobs and which ones are not. That's the fundamental work that needs to be done. What
is your opinion of what's happening in Zuccotti Park? Because some of the members of your party have been quite critical.
Well, look, I fought for this. I mean, I believe in the First Amendment. I think that whether they be on the left or the right, that any American has the right to go out and to assemble, to express their free speech, to petition our government. This is what made us special and different from other countries around the world. So, I think it's a vital portion of a democracy.
So you don't agree with those folks who would say what they want is class warfare and it's dangerous to democracy?
Well, you're always going to find individuals who will make different kind of descriptions and analysis. Look, again, whether it's on the left or the right, Americans have the right to come together to express their free speech. And as to the general thrust of things, could we be doing better? Absolutely, we could be doing better.
Well, Congressman, that's interesting, because I don't think you may be the very first person that I've heard say that you fought for that particular right to assemble and to demonstrate. So that's very interesting. I want to thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you, Liz. Great to be with you.